I entered photojournalism and really strongly believing that photography could change the world. And then I realized that actually, if you want to change the world with photography, first you have to change photography, and then eventually you can change the world with the new photography. In the art world, when I finished my studies, I felt very disappointed with the language of the art. How artists have actually something maybe very interesting to say, but they use a language that is so personal and so coded that it's very difficult for the normal, not literate, normal people in the street to understand exactly what they want, what they mean. So I went to the other extreme, that is photojournalism, where you have really interesting things to say, not about you, and you have a very accessible language. And then I experimented with both and decided to stay in the middle. I always loved telling stories in small squares, like comic books. Photography was a very natural development for me because I was already used to framing things and building a story, but just constructing everything in the frame. So I embraced photography because I loved it, and I think it triggered all this romanticism in me about, wow, this is a very powerful tool. And then I sort of got disappointed and stayed halfway between the comic book and documentary photography, that I think is maybe what I'm doing now, I don't know. My biggest inspiration comes from cinema. It also comes from literature, and it also comes, of course, from comic books. Any sequence, any story that is told to me in a non-formal, non-traditional way is definitely a source of inspiration. And I love to analyze from which context, where is he writing from, how is he describing himself, who is the narrator, who is the target audience. Like, try to understand the context where this piece of information is created and generated, and why is it created or generated. Because that's how I learn and how I can experiment and eventually break boundaries or explore beyond the boundaries we have in photography right now. Humor is, I think, one of the most important things in my work. It's the only detail, the only approach that I'm really careful to always respect. Through sense of humor, build a critique and make my point through sense of humor is important to me. And then you go again to the tradition of comedy in theater, Molière and all the classical French that actually make a tremendous critique to the system with comedy. It's more difficult because you don't know where the limit is, and you don't know how people are going to understand sense of humor, because it changes a lot from one place to the next, and according to cultures as well. But I think if you manage to make someone laugh, it relaxes him, and then it's like a Trojan horse. You just... This interest in not talking about my own culture and using the rest of the world to build my stories actually is a strategy, because I'm actually most of the time talking about my own culture and how my own culture understands the world I live in. I mean, I am European, and we all know that it's a Western culture that is predominating and that is even deciding what the other culture should look like or should be described with, no? For example, Afronauts is my first big project, and there is different ways of approaching that project. You can approach it from the African or Afro-descendant point of view, and it can be maybe offensive or not. But then the target audience is not Africans or Afro-descendant, it is white people. The Afronauts is a series that plays and reenacts and stages a real fact. That is, in 1964, Zambia, after becoming independent, started its own space race, inspired by the space race that the United States and the Soviet Union were racing at the time. So they started their own to show the rest of the world that they were as big, as important, as free as the other big countries. They were, I think they were very serious. The people who were training and the person who was leading it was very serious, maybe not realistic. I was really trying to make the point about what Europeans or what Western people expect from Africa. because I had my own cliches that I had been consuming all my life. I wanted to build a story around this misunderstanding, intentional confusion that we have been creating in the continent. And then I found by chance this story, and it had all the elements that I wanted to present. On top of that, I was a victim myself of the game that I wanted to build for others, because when I first saw the video of the Afronauts, the real interview they do to Edward Makuka, I was like, wow, this is really well done. Like, who made this fake? Because it's really well done. At no point did I credit the veracity of the story. Immediately a lot of images started coming to my mind based on Tintin and lots of comic books and science fiction books. So it was very easy for me to visualize and to imagine what an African space program would look like. Gentleman's Club is a natural also evolution of my work. I just really try to study how women are represented and how our cliches and stereotypes are built around the body of the woman, and especially around prostitution. That for me is one of the lowest points of consideration, social consideration of women, is how prostitutes are sort of romanticized with movies and everything, and then but also criminalized in the newspapers, and then women are totally like against prostitutes. We don't even talk to them because they're dirty. So there is a mix of so many that is so rotten. And I think there is a total lack of information because we just assimilate prostitution to women. I mean, if you think of prostitution, the first idea that comes to your mind is a prostitute, a woman. But if she is a prostitute, it's because there is a client. Why don't we think of the clients instead of the women? And when I'm doing this project that is basically paying clients to pose for me, so actually inverting the roles, then it's very natural. I'm not being judgmental. I'm just curious, and I just want them to share the information they have and that women normally don't have access to. I think it normalizes the understanding we have of the men. Like, it's not all like pervert people at all. It can be anyone. It can be my father, it can be my brother, it can be my neighbor. And that idea is not to justify them, but rather to normalize them, to explain that everybody can do it, and everybody actually does it. Because, I mean, if you see the statistics in Spain, for example, if I'm not wrong, it's around 85% of married men confess going with prostitutes. Midnight at the Crossroads is a work that I've been doing for 3 years with Bruno Moraes, who is now my husband, and he's a Brazilian photographer that I met doing different projects. And because I was very familiar with Africa, I had been going to Nigeria quite a lot, and Benin, and I was very, very interested in starting to get it like really immersed in the voodoo and African-rooted religions. And we started comparing how things are in Africa, from what I knew, to how things are in America in terms of religion and the transformations, adaptations, continuations of the religion. It started as a conversation, and it became a 3-year project where we follow one of the spirits, one of the energies that was syncretized by the missionaries as the devil. So we actually follow the path of the devil. And we go from Benin to Cuba, to Brazil, and we finish in Haiti. And it has a transformation that has very much to do with the evolution of a life, of the ages of the man. In Benin, it is a totem. I mean, the main representation is not a human shape. It's like a totem. It's like a piece, with the cowries, and you don't really see the human shape. Then in Cuba, it is a small boy, black, small boy. In Brazil, it is a young man, that is a seductive young man of the night that is going to create confusion and They call it a malandro in Brazil, especially in Rio de Janeiro. That's where we were working. It's the guy that is waiting in the corner all dressed in white. Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal is very inspired on the malandro. It's the gangster, the neighborhood gangster that knows everything, that smuggles and so on. And then in Haiti, it's an old man. It's Papa Legba. And if you even want to continue in Haiti, in Haitian voodoo, when you die, the paradise, the idea of paradise is Guinea, that is a country in Africa. So it is a circle of life and going back to Africa. It's beautiful. It's I think one of the projects where I've learned the most and where it was like, wow. In this project, what we try to do is to mix real documentary, so try to make accessible the ceremonies and to try to understand better how it works and how they worship this energy. But also try to understand, because sometimes the ceremonies can be a bit strong, because there is animal sacrifice and there is these trances and you get incorporations, and that can be a bit scary. So to try to put some balance on that, we also did interpretations of the fables and the legends and all the mythology of voodoo in all these different places. It's really like an ethnological part, because what we try to do is to photograph the mediums. That is, you normally have a ceremony to bring the spirits to this world, and so you can ask them things and you can talk to them, because that's one of the characteristics of this religion, is you have direct access to the gods. So we took images of these gods, all the people who actually are used as mediums. So it's the santeros in Cuba. It's the people they do all this ceremony and they are in trance. And in Cuba there's different. You have palo, you have santeria, and then you have a darkest one that is it's more devilish. We try to mix what Western depiction of religious characters are, with sanctity, and how you make them like look amazing and shiny, and that comes from me, of course. And then there is the mix of Bruno that is much more native and indigenous, but that's the beauty of it, that it was really a mix of cultures, and we were coming from very different approaches. All these religions that do not have a book as a starting point, they're actually much more linked to the earth, to nature, to environment, and they are therefore much more respectful. You might think it's inferior to think like that, but I think it's kind of cool to respect a waterfall, no? I'm not saying we have to dump all the religion we've built, but it would be interesting to include this respect for environmental and start considering natural phenomena as something you need to respect and to listen. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm not a rational person. I count on other things, and why not? It's not that I count, that I rely on them, but I'm not surprised when things that I don't understand or I cannot explain actually happen. It makes things easier.